turn as the moderator. Michael?
Be good. Yes. Oh.
And we are very happy to have, I think it's been probably 10 or 11 years. Wow, 12 years. After 12 years, he's come back. Elvis Mitchell, the film critic, we all know. We have a new guest this year, Professor Richard Neupert from the University of Georgia. And from Mexico, one of our far-flung correspondents, Gerardo Velaro. And this chair, Roger Ebert.
All right. Please.
Testing. Some of you may remember Roy Anderson's previous film, Songs from the Second Floor, that played here a few years ago. That made quite an impression here. I guess you could say one of the reasons I invited you, The Living, was popular demand. It was possible to laugh.
Well, let's talk about it. This film premiered in 2007 at the Cannes Film Festival, and moved on to Toronto and other festivals after that, and limited release. It's a film that and there's a million things you can say about it, but first of all, it was very heartening for me to hear it really kind of embraced by this audience. I mean, there are so goddamn many laughs, especially in the first half of this film. And I guess what really struck me a second time tonight is how he really does prepare you for a shift into different kinds of laughter, or different corners of the human comedy. And even if you don't think the film has anything grander to say than live it while you got it, what I like about the film is it sort of works on everybody at its own speed, because there's always a vignette or two that sort of demands the audience to kind of, approach it with a different sense of humor than maybe the previous four. It's almost like installation art more than a film. It's almost like walking into an Ed and Nancy Kienholz exhibit, or it's a roomy kind of film. You know, you can kind of sort of deal with it on your own terms in a way. And I guess because it's got such a determinedly fixed camera, it only moves a couple of times. I think twice or three times. Three? And they're basically hallway tracking shots. Slow, but what you really are struck with is how Anderson's meticulous eye for how everything is framed within, and usually sort of on a very strong diagonal slant, so there's a strong diagonal focal point. And somehow it keeps every tableau a little different than the last one. All of which sort of adds up to what you want it to add up to, I think. But let's talk a little more about it. I'd just like to hear impressions from other people.
Well, I thought if you could combine The Far Side and Ingmar Bergman, this is what you would get. So much so, I mean, what you realize is you're watching for the very first 30 seconds that he manages to make the real world look two-dimensional. I mean, there's a flatness to everything. Everything looks like almost Trompe l'oeil, and you think, though, those must be painted backgrounds, and then people will start to move, or the light will very slowly shift, and you realize that the entire frame is populated with people, and there's you're seeing depth of field used in a way, not just for that really sharp clarity, but in fact to comment on what you're watching is just astonishing. And also to get actors who can convey so much emotion vocally without ever changing expression is incredible too, I think. Well, yeah, I mean,
and yeah, they're also really distant from the camera at the same time that you get emotion from them. And what your point is really, I think, excellent about the whole notion of three-dimensional and the diagonal lines and stuff. For a film student, it's like, oh, it looks like Lumiere shots. We've got these, static camera, wonderful sense of perspective. And you're right, at the same time, there's this really flat lighting and the amazing pastels that make it also flat at the same time. Like you're always looking through a store window, or you're always looking through some kind of filter at
Well,
them.
it looks like an old apartment because you realize that there's kind of an off-white quality, like the way that an old apartment building looks in the entire thing.
That's kind of what reminded me of these Kienholz exhibits. And what Anderson himself said was that he's in one interview, he said, I want light that people can't hide in, light without mercy. And that's sort of the operating visual tone here. Yeah. I think, I like your description better, Elvis, but it occurred to me that it's really more like a funny Swedish Edward Hopper.
Wow, that's a killer, Mike, actually.
Now, what amazed me was that the movie has no plot, it has no narrative, but somehow it connects, somehow all the vignettes connect you from point A to point B, at the beginning of the movie to the end of the movie. Just don't ask me to explain points A and B because that's another story completely. I was amazed about the colors because it seems to me like if you take the colors from this movie and mix them with an Almodovar movie, you get like a regular, normal movie.
That's fantastic.
But really, the movie, this film couldn't work. On normal colors, it would just look silly. It would look ridiculous.
Or pushy, if it were, I think if it were a more aggressive color palette, I think you'd be sort of forced into the wrong kind of comic response, maybe?
Yeah, and it's also, there was some review, I can't remember who it was, who said they all look like they live way too close to a nuclear reactor. But also, it's like those there's the Danish painter Hammershøi, who's has a strong influence, really, I think, on Scandinavian visual style. And he's got these exhibits where, like, it's corners of his room, and there's sort of this empty, pallid kind of coloring, too. So there's this sort of Scandinavian, not just sort of grimness, too, but also in a visual style, I think, of sort of almost mocking the world you live in, and at the same time, of just really parceling out and fragmenting it.
There was a very good profile of Anderson in, oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. No, please go ahead.
Every single shot was filmed on sets in the studio.